Ah, yes. Elitism, the eternal boogeyman of the Fire Emblem community, the 0% growths LTC Jagan that terrorizes innocent gamers, the gatekeeper of fun, the 25-year-old internet boomer who tells you to play 3CS 776, and the same ancient antediluvian horror who has just informed you that your favorite character is bad because they're not efficient to train. As a proud Fire Emblem elitist myself, I have personally driven away thousands of filthy casuals from our precious game, and I can only hope to filter out many more in years to come. I am being sarcastic right now. So, what is elitism anyway? Does it still exist? And is it a problem for our community? I'll get into that, but first let's delve into the horrifying origins of the Fire Emblem community, into the history of elitism. At the dawn of time, in the mid-2000s, people played Fire Emblem, but unfortunately, some of them had opinions. Terrifying. And so, on places like Serenus Forest, people argued, and some opinions rose to the top, with evidence supported by debates, game completion, high rank, and low turn counts. These discussions led to many things that are now common knowledge in Fire Emblem today, such as flyers being good, cavaliers being good, dancers being good, or Jagans being useful. All of this common sense was established during this period. And while discussion can lead to greater insight, after a certain point, things stopped being useful for the average person and started becoming more nitpicky. As they say, you either die a hero or live to become the villain. Soon, optimization pushed the game further and further, with various challenges such as LTCs or ranked runs, and while advice is welcome when compared to incorrect advice, it is much less palatable when it is not solicited or when the advice pertains to playstyles that are not relevant to you. This led to many discussions made in the context of these challenges, which was then also applied to regular play, which inevitably brought people into conflict. This phenomenon led to the concept of the first kind of elitist, the stereotypical LTC gamer who says that they play better than you and tells you that you're playing the game wrong. Of course, being good at the game does not mean that you are an elitist, and in fact, you can be elitist despite being bad at the game. It's more about the attitude that you hold, an attitude of superiority over other fans. And since there is no agreed upon measure of skill in this single player game, like ELO or MMR, any perceived superiority lacks legitimacy. In a multiplayer game like StarCraft, you could definitely say that a Grandmaster level player's opinion is worth more than that of a Bronze League player, because their word is backed up by success and pedigree. However, LTC and challenge runs require different kinds of skills and knowledge compared to the base game. Hell, it may as well be an entirely different kind of game entirely. And so to many people, the LTC elitist's opinion sometimes feels illegitimate because it is not relevant to how they play the game. And I think that's the core of this idea. Some kind of unjustified superiority complex that defines the elitist. They think their opinion is worth more than yours, but this is a kind of game where it's hard to prove that. I think this was the prevailing kind of elitist for the longest time, but after the release of Fire Emblem Awakening, a new kind of elitist sprung forth from the earth. Or rather, they were already there. The Fire Emblem series was more of a niche series until Fire Emblem Awakening really revived the franchise and brought with it an extremely large number of fans that greatly outnumbered the previous population. However, most established communities were populated by fans of the old games, a large portion of which did not like the changes introduced by the newer titles. As a result, there were clashes between the fans of the old games and the fans of the new games. The old guard was derided as elitists, and the new fans were labeled casuals or awakening babies. This kind of game versus game clash continued for a long time throughout the release of Fire Emblem Awakening and Fates, but kind of died down after that. I believe at its core, elitism in Fire Emblem as we know it is about gameplay, because that's a main part of the game that has real player agency. The characters you use, the difficulty you play, and even the game that you choose to play are something that reflects your skill and knowledge. And so I think arguing about one's preferred games is not necessarily elitism, but it can be if it's about difficulty and gameplay. But when arguments stray away from this, away from gameplay, I don't think it can be considered elitism anymore. It's just another form of online tribalism or toxicity. A person's preference for a game's story or characters does not really say anything about a person's status as a supposed elite player. In the current day, talk about elitism has significantly quieted down, and I think one of the main reasons of this is the increasing prevalence of other forms of internet scuffles. The most prominent, obviously, being morality debates about Fire Emblem 3 houses, where people argue about the war crimes of various characters such as Edelgard and Dimitri. While discussion can be inflammatory and unpleasant, this is more about moral superiority than about being good at video games. While frustrating in its own right, this isn't really elitism as we think of it in Fire Emblem. Furthermore, Fire Emblem 3 houses specifically has not added too much fuel to the fire for elitism, because it does not lend particularly well to gameplay optimization to begin with. Its difficulties are either way too easy or way too hard, and the game is very repetitive in later playthroughs. So for this and other reasons, there aren't too many people interested in getting good at it. There's also an increasing number of players who mainly care about Fire Emblem for its narrative and characters, without really caring much about gameplay at all. So without anyone to say anything about gameplay and anyone to hear it, there's not much room for elitism in this game. I also think elitism as a term has become very diluted from what it used to mean, and this is why many people today think elitism is no longer a thing, while others have the opposite opinion. I often see it used as a straw man criticism of a mythical Kaga-era Fire Emblem fanboy, or sometimes even reversed to criticize casual elitists. These are people who cry elitist against anything that is slightly optimized, because they disagree with the playstyle or the philosophy of the challenge. Elitist is just a good general use criticism in this community when you don't want to address any of the actual points that someone makes. And further muddying the waters are an increasing contingent of people who use the term ironically, like me and many of my viewers. These people use elitism as an ironic badge of honor to signal that they care about the more hardcore or high-skill elements of the game. And because elitism has become diluted, it has lost its meaning and has become boring for many people. More specifically, it has become boring for the typical unpleasant, overly online, overly invested fan that makes up the majority of internet discussion. And so people who just want to argue on the internet probably gravitate more towards the bigger controversies, leading people away from talking about elitism and to other, more active fights, such as the Edelgard morality debates. Ultimately, I think elitism has not much to do with what you say, but rather how you say it. For example, if you say that casual mode is bad and if you play it you're not a real fan, then that's elitist. And if you want to do that, sure, okay, you're just unpleasant. But I think what most people are trying to do is convince people to play the game in a way that they think is more fun. And if you do that nicely, then that can't be considered elitist in any way. I think most people are generally well-intentioned, but poorly equipped rhetorically for this purpose. The reason it's gotten better is that the Fire Emblem community has simply matured, with the demographic literally becoming older, more learned in internet etiquette and rhetoric, more capable of formulating a point without being offensive. People have actually grown out of it. So, is elitism still a problem in the Fire Emblem community? It definitely was in the past, but now, I don't think so. I'm sure it still exists in pockets and nooks and crannies. If you look really hard or find specific people, I'm sure you can find examples. But is it frequent? Not really. I can see elitism being a bit of a pain on an individual level, but on an institutional level, I don't think it exists. Most Fire Emblem content creators are highly skilled at the game, but they're not particularly elitist. The term is overwhelmingly used for comedic or narrative purpose these days, as an ironic badge of honor or as a boogeyman. Simply put, you can't really be elitist if you're not mean and condescending, and there are fewer instances of people being mean and condescending in the Fire Emblem community these days, compared to back in the day where there were entire forums basically dedicated to it. Maybe we'll see new waves of nostalgic neo-elitists when Fire Emblem Engage releases, but I wouldn't hold my breath. Frankly, we have it pretty good here compared to other places, like the SMT community. God damn, they have it rough. Anyway, that's my analysis on elitism in the Fire Emblem community in the modern day. If there's something you think I've missed, or that you disagree with, or that you'd like to add, let me know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.